There are leaks and rumors dating back to last year that talk about the Fox X-Men being a big part of Marvel's Secret Wars. The reports then were that Kevin Feige wanted to redeem these characters and give these actors proper justice before bringing in his own MCU X-Men. But many of us at the time were like, okay, cool, that sounds dope, but what does that even mean? How could he give justice to those characters? And then we got all these crazy Deadpool plot leaks, and I think it all makes sense now. Let's talk about how Kevin Feige is going to redeem the Fox X-Men. Smash a freaking like on this video, and let's begin. Okay, so spoiler warning for Deadpool 3, and again, take this with a grain of salt. We don't know for sure if this is actually going to be the plot of that film, but we've been talking about it a lot in streams and videos. It's huge right now. It's everything that everybody's talking about is Deadpool 3. And part of the reason is because you're going to get a lot of Fox X-Men in Deadpool 3. There's apparently going to be Halle Berry Storm, James Marsden Cyclops, Ian McKellen Magneto, the girl with the weird name that played Jean Grey. I think her name was Fro, and yeah, Google's right in front of me. What of it? The point is, you're getting a lot of the Fox X-Men in Deadpool 3, and that is freaking awesome. But there's an additional leak out there that is giving a lot of context to how Feige is going to be treating the Fox X-Men. And again, this really makes it all make sense. This is how he's going to redeem the characters. And it's all about how the TVA is going to essentially hate the mutants and the X-Men because they have so many time-traveling shenanigans that they just create so many branch universes that the continuity is crazy. It's a massive headache for the TVA that's trying to prune different timelines. And that's going to be used as a plot device. So instead of the Fox X-Men being treated as canon and trying to explain all of the wonkiness of the continuity that they had, instead, Feige's going to throw all of that out and just say that when it comes to mutants and when it comes to the X-Men, it's just so many different variant universes. The basic idea here is there's so much time travel that equals so many variants. And the point is the X-Men actors are going to be presented to us, the audience, as the main X-Men variants. And I think we will probably meet them as variants in the same way that we met Loki as a variant in the Loki show. What I mean is that's our Loki. We're familiar with that character, but he's also a different version of the character than the one that was killed in Avengers Infinity War. Because we take Loki out of time around the time of the Battle of New York in Avengers 1, he has a completely different trajectory than the Loki we saw get killed in Infinity War. So it's kind of like the same character, but different things are now happening to that character. And that is going to be the same thing that happens with the Fox X-Men. I think we will automatically meet variants of the same characters we met in the Fox universe. It's kind of how Peter B. Parker in Across the Spider-Verse is like a B variant of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, or at least that's kind of what we believe. And you see, this is how he's going to do justice to these versions of the characters. Essentially, the versions that we already met in the Fox movies will be variants of like the original and played by the same actor characters. I hope this is making sense. It's a very subtle thing. It's going to allow him to have the nostalgia because it's the same actors playing the same characters, but he's basically going to give them an entirely new past that will be different from what we saw in the Fox X-Men films. This is very similar to the justice that they gave to characters in No Way Home. If you don't remember, Andrew Garfield literally has an entire arc of his character that happened off screen that we get told through his own dialogue. When he has that moment with Tom Holland and with Toby by the billboard when it's raining after Aunt May dies, he talks about how he got bitter, how he stopped holding back his punches, and he kind of goes dark. It's even implied that he possibly killed some of the villains from his own universe. And so technically speaking, that's a different Spider-Man than the one we met in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But all the things that happened to that character in those movies technically still happened to this version of Andrew. So they're able to give justice and development to the character of Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker while also being able to play upon the nostalgia of seeing him again as Spider-Man. And the villains get a lot of this justice too. I mean, the freaking Shocker. Jamie Foxx's Shocker in No Way Home, so much cooler. He acts so much cooler. He also has a way better look. This will be the same way that Feige is going to do justice to the X-Men. And again, this is all based upon that leak. Take it with a grain of salt, but my thinking on this is clearly going to be the way that he's going to deliver this justice. This is how he's going to redeem these actors. And so what's this all like actually going to look like when we see it in the movie? Well, I think it's going to just be more comic book accurate. So you'll see James Marsden as Cyclops, except he's going to look a little bit more like the Cyclops from the comics. This probably includes wearing the yellow, wearing the spandex, having a yellow optical blaster on his head. But I think he's also going to act more like Scott from the comics. So less emotional, less wishy-washy, more of a badass. I mean, Cyclops is kind of a badass in Marvel Comics, and he has been for some time. And I think a similar thing of Storm. Like, I think Halle Berry's Storm is going to look a little bit more comic book accurate. I can't wait to see what that looks like with modern effects. But I think she'll even act more like the one from the comics. Maybe even having an accent, maybe just having more of the motivations of Storm that we know from the comics or the 90s television show, and on and on and on. I think if we see Jean Grey in this movie, she's going to be way more like comic book Jean Grey in both costume and look, but also in the way she acts. And there's another thing in the leaks that's really crazy, and I think is also going to add to this, because it's a really difficult balance to have the nostalgia that was established by these other movies and yet introduce these characters as variants of the characters you saw before. That's like really tricky. But the rumor is we're actually going to go back to different moments that did happen in the Fox X-Men movies. Mainly, if the recent plot leak is to be believed, there will be another version of the Golden Gate Bridge scene from X3. This is where Magneto takes the bridge across and he's attacking that facility. Yeah, they're going to do a version of that fight, but likely with the Fox version of the X-Men, but a more comic book accurate version. And I can even imagine Deadpool like looking to the camera and saying like, wow, this is way better than what it was in that movie. And if it would have been this cool, maybe they wouldn't have rebooted it. So it kind of seems like he's going to double down on the nostalgia by literally going back to these different movies. But again, the context is so important because it's not going back to those different movies. It's going back to a version, a variant of events of those old movies. It's very similar to the way that the 838 universe feels like a variant of the 616. You see a lot of familiar faces, but you also see Charles Xavier that looks like he's from the Fox X-Men in that group. And so now, more than a year later, it kind of makes sense when we first heard that Feige was going to give justice to these characters, when we first heard that he really wanted to have a proper goodbye to all of the Fox X-Men. Now it kind of makes more sense. Like, this really seems like what he's going to do, and then he's going to introduce something that's probably very different for the MCU 616, but it's almost like he felt like he had to go back to the OGs, to the Fox X-Men, and he still had to retcon the OG X-Men to make sure that they're like actually like the comic book X-Men. And that's dope, because I kind of want to see that before we get into, again, what I think will probably be very different for the MCU 616. Let me know if that made sense. If you understand what I'm getting at here, let me know in the comment section below. Smash like on this video if you liked it. If you had any questions about anything I talked about here, or just anything nerdy in general, come on by the live streaming channel. We stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.